I now invite you to listen to the Word of God as portrayed in a dramatic reading this morning based upon the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 17, verses 32 to 49, with the characters of David, a.k.a. Derek Harris, the character of Saul, Jim Stolzfus, and the character of Goliath, Andy Apple. A long time ago, strangers came into the land of the Canaanites from the north and from the south, from the east and from the west. Some came in search of food, some came seeking freedom. All came looking for a new beginning. From the west came the Philistines who settled along the coast. They brought knowledge of iron and the ability to make iron utensils, tools, and weapons. From the east came the Israelites who settled in the hill country. They knew how to farm and raise animals like sheep. The Philistines and the Israelites lived peacefully, side by side for many years. Some of their people met and got to know each other. As is often the way, disagreements and fighting began between these two peoples who were different but shared a common world. The situation got worse until one day the armies of the Philistines gathered on one mountain. The army of the Israelites gathered on the mountain on the other side. Between them, there was a valley.
Don't let anyone be frightened because of that man. I am your servant, and I will go fight him.
Don't be ridiculous. You can't fight the Philistine. You're only a youth. And he has been a warrior since childhood. You lack age and experience.
I work as a shepherd for my father. Whenever a lion or a bear has come and attacked one of my lands, I've gone after it and struck it down to rescue the land from the predator's mouth. If it turned to attack me, I would take it by the chin, beat it, and kill it. I have killed both lion and bear, and as your servant, I will kill this uncircumcised Philistine too, since he has dared taunt the armies of the living God, the Eternal One who saved me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will save me from the hands of this Philistine.
Go then, and may the Eternal One be with you.
So Saul outfitted David in the king's own armor, a bronze helmet to protect his head, and a coat of mail to protect his chest. David strapped on Saul's sword outside the armor and then discovered he could not move because he was not used to the restrictions of the weighty armor.
I'm not used to these things. How can I attack an enemy when I can't even walk? So he removed every bit of Saul's armor. He would fight Philistine as he had fought those lions and bears.
He took his staff in his hand and went to the stream to choose 5 smooth stones, which he kept in a pouch in his shepherd's bag. He had his sling ready as he approached a Philistine. The Philistine, with his shield bearer in front of him, came closer to David. When he saw that David was only a healthy and handsome boy, Goliath's eyes filled with contempt.
Am I a dog? You come to beat me with a stick?
And he cursed David, invoking the names of his Philistine gods.
Come here. I will feed your flesh to the birds of the air and the wild animals of the fields.
You come to me carrying a sword and a spear and a javelin as your weapons, but I come armed with the name of the Eternal One, the commander of heavenly armies, the true God of the armies of Israel, and the one you have insulted. This very day, the Eternal One will give you into my hands. I will strike you down and cut off your head, and I will feed the birds of the air and the wild animals of the fields with the flesh of your Philistine warriors. Then all of the land will know the true God is with Israel, and all of those gathered here will know that the Eternal One does not save by sword and spear. The battle is the Eternal One's, and he will give you into our hands.
When the Philistines stood up and approached, David ran toward the line of battle to meet him. As quick as a flash, he reached into his bag, put a stone into his sling, launched it at the Philistine, hitting him in the head. The stone sank deeply into his forehead, and the Philistine fell face first onto the ground. Here ends the lesson.
Thank you all for making that much more interesting. That was much more interesting than just reading the text, a very long text. It's hard. That's a hard act to follow. But today is about disrupting and disruption. That's our theme. So it seemed like this was the Sunday to try to get you to sit in a different place. We talked about doing this differently, and we opted with the color sections because that way at least I was going to try and bring you all closer to the front. But the idea is that sometimes we need a little bit of a disruption to help us look at a different perspective. You know, we have our perspective, and we just naturally think that our perspective is the correct perspective and maybe even the only perspective. But when we move our seats, then we start to think about the issues and life a little differently. So that was why I invited you to do this. But the whole idea of the seating piece, because I like structure and routine as much as anybody. I like to have my seat and go there too. And there's good in that, which we're going to talk about too. But if you are in a place where you are bothered by the noise in the narthex, in the lobby, because sometimes it's not particularly quiet out there, even though we're having worship in here, then I invite you to come closer and move towards the center where you're going to hear better. If you have problems with the projection or the sound, this wasn't my best choice, you can change your place with regard to the speakers now that the speakers are all in the front. And these first pews have these kind of ear connections. You put that on your ear, and then you can hear. It works with hearing aids as an additional hearing device. So, but they're only in that second row. So if you're having trouble hearing, come up to the second row where we have these cool things to help you hear. Actually, as I was writing it was like all of my directions are to come closer. Come closer to the center. Because two things happen. One, it's easier. There you go. Come on closer. Two things happen. One, you are closer so you can make a better connection with the speaker, whether it's me or our dramatic actors today. Also, if we're all closer, then we have a greater sense of not being alone in worship. When we have a big sanctuary and we have lots of places to sit, but we are praying for the day when the pews are full again. You know, we're praying for people who want to encounter God and choose to join us because of what we believe and how we believe. And so getting that message out and praying for people to join us. That's another growth strategy. You know, we don't always do that one. We want to think of all of our gimmicks, but actually praying for people to be here. And I put up that is a picture from Christmas Eve of a different perspective. I'm guessing that most of you don't sit in that section very often and see the sanctuary from that perspective. Today's story is also about perspective and about imagining what could be. You know, we know the story of David and Goliath well, right? We've been teaching that since the kids were little. And I think when we listen to that story, we tend to associate with David. We want to be David. We want to be the one who stands up for God's people, who fights injustice, who is there to challenge the big guy or the oppressor. But if we imagine what could be, imagine what we as America are in the greater world. Imagine how we are perceived by people in other countries. I think that our role is far more of the Goliath than the David. And I think that there are countries and there are probably Davids growing up who are thinking that they are going to be the David that goes after Goliath. Because we have meddled in other countries. We have started wars to protect our interests. We have told the world how big and how great we are. What if we imagine what could be if we started making healing the injustices of the world our mission? Making sure that all people had food and access to clean water. What if our goal, rather than having cheap products and huge profits for our corporations, what if our goal was making sure that people had a roof over their head? Whatever that looks like. Doesn't mean a big house, but some type of shelter to live in. What if those were our goals instead? Imagine what the world could be. Well, it's been an interesting week along that line. There's been a lot in the news. I picked two stories that dealt directly with the church. And the church being church with a capital C, the big church. Churches United. And one of the things that happened on Wednesday was the rally in Harrisburg for equitable funding of public school in Pennsylvania. This group is a group of faithful people, an interfaith group of faithful people of different congregations all over Pennsylvania that came together in the Capitol to make our voices heard, that we want to work toward this equitable funding. Right now, only new money, when the PA government puts new money into the school, into education budget, it goes through the fair funding formula. But the way the money has always been distributed is the way the money will always be distributed. And it doesn't matter what the numbers are. So a school district that reduces in numbers gets the same amount of money that they did when they had more. And a school district that grows gets the same money they did when they had less. It ignores what's happening and says, this is what you got 15 years ago, so this is what you're going to continue to get. Whereas the fair funding doesn't look at it that way. It looks at poverty levels and who has the most children in poverty that needs more resources. So imagine, and that we do have a bill in the House of Representatives that's gaining some traction. Imagine what Pennsylvania public education could be if all schools and all children had the textbooks and resources to learn, as opposed to being sent home with homework where the textbook's online and they have no laptop or iPad or anything at home to read the textbook. It's an interesting situation, but we are making progress. The other interesting thing that happened this week came through the United Methodist Church. Over 600 people in the United Methodist denomination have signed on to I've got formal complaint in my head. It's bigger than a formal complaint against Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who is a Methodist. And they have it's a charge. It's an ecclesiastical charge that will be settled in an ecclesiastical court, meaning the churches are going to come together and the clergy and the bishops are going to decide what happens. But he is being charged with breaking church law and church principle by supporting the policy on immigration. This hasn't happened since the 1850s. It hasn't happened since the 1850s that the church chose to do this type of thing and have an ecclesiastical council on someone who wasn't a clergy member. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. So today, I want you to imagine what could be. Imagine what could be. Imagine the sanctuary filled. And I want you to pray that. I want you to pray that people will be called here to worship the God that we know loves us, no matter who we are. Because there's people out there that don't know God the way we know God. That we have a God of love who loves everyone. No questions, no exceptions. Who welcomes everyone into a relationship. Let's pray for that. And on Monday night at the council meeting, someone asked, what are some of the reasons why people leave our congregation? And one of the top reasons people leave is because they have been coming and they stop coming for some reason, whether it's an illness or something happens, and no one from the church except the pastors calls them. No one contacts them and says, hey, I haven't seen you in a while. Are you okay? Or a note, a card to say, miss you at church. See, that is the advantage of me not messing with your places that you sit. Because when you sit in the places that you like to sit, you know who sits around you, right? And then you notice who's not there, so that you can reach out. So I'm not going to keep messing with your seating, but I want you to pay attention to that. Look at the people that you talk to each week, and if they're not there next week, call them, send them a note. If you feel like you're intruding too much, they tell me that it's easy to get out of the habit of going to church on Sunday. I don't want it to be a habit. I want it to be something that you look forward to, that is meaningful to you. Okay? And that you value. And if people value when they come in and they know that someone cares that they're there, right? We want to be noticed. We want to be cared for. So think about that. Think about the ways that you could reach out to people who you don't see. And let's change the expectation. I mean, the expectation now, the people that write tell us that the expectation now is that most people who feel that they're regular attenders come once a month. Well, if people start getting notes that, boy, we missed you last Sunday, maybe they'll think that maybe they ought to come more than once a month. That there's stuff going on here that you don't want to miss. And people miss you. One of the other unwritten rules that came out through the cottage meetings is that we're family. So if we're family and someone doesn't come to the family gathering, do we reach out and say, hey, what's up? How are you? You okay? Do you need anything? And then maybe we'll find out more about what's happening in people's lives. Heather and I tend to have this kind of information, but everybody needs to have that kind of information. If you hear someone's name mentioned in the prayer, send them a card or call them on the phone. Because that means there's something going on. You know, yes, you can ask us what's happening, and we can usually tell you, but it means more to the person if you contact them and you find out what's happening. It's that connection that we all need, right? It's that connection so that we can feel as powerful as David because we are loved. David was very clear about who he was and his relationship with his God. And that's the part of David that we can hold on to and that we can say, yes, that's what we want to. May it be so. Amen.